You're listening to the 20% Podcast, powered by the 20% Collective, a community of trailblazing women financial advisors redefining what it means to build a firm on your terms. No fluff, no ego. Just bold conversations, fresh perspectives, and real-world strategies to help you lead, grow, and own your success. This is the 20% Podcast.
Hi, I'm Cathy Curtis, founder of Curtis Financial Planning and co-founder of the 20% Collective. Today's guest is someone I admire on so many levels. Danika Waddell is the founder of Xena Financial Planning in Seattle, where she works primarily with women in tech. What I love about Danika's story is how real it is. She didn't grow up dreaming of being a financial planner. She majored in math, spent years in accounting, and then made a mid-career shift when she realized she wanted work that actually connected her technical brain with real people's lives. And in 2020, she took the leap and launched her own firm. But what truly sets Danika apart is her voice, bold, clear, and unapologetic. When something feels unfair or dismissive, especially around women, diversity, equity, and inclusion, she speaks up. She's one of the few in our field willing to put her name on the hard conversations, and that's why so many of us look to her for inspiration. In our conversation, we talk about where that courage comes from, how it shaped her path into entrepreneurship, and the intentional culture she's built inside Xena. We also touch on the masterminds that supported her, the story behind her 50-50 merger, and her new initiative, Xena Rising, a retreat and community for women who want to move the industry forward. A theme that threads through everything she shares is one of my favorite lines from the episode, "Be afraid and do it anyway." She's honest that speaking up still makes her nervous, but she keeps showing up, and that's her power. This is a heart-forward conversation about courage, community, and building a career that feels true to you. If you're a woman in this profession wondering whether you're ready for a bigger step, this episode will feel like the gentle nudge you've been waiting for. Let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Danika Waddell. Hi, Danika. Welcome to the 20% Podcast.
Hey, Cathy. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm thrilled that you're here. You are the perfect candidate to be on this podcast, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I am too.
So, you have been a very visible and outspoken advocate in our industry for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in fact, I'm a great admirer of yours because you're one of the few people that seems fearless when it comes to speaking out. And many of us, including me, kind of take a back seat. And I don't know why fear of repercussion or not wanting to stick our neck out, you know all the reasons. But you are not one of those. And I'm fascinated by it. And I want to know what drives you. Like, did something happen in your background, the way you were raised, experiences? What drives you to be so, in my opinion, courageous?
Yeah, you nailed it. I think that I am not very reserved, might be one way of saying it. And I think that really comes from a couple of things. One is I'm not very good at not speaking out. Like if I see something, I have a pretty hard time not saying anything. So it's definitely my natural inclination is to speak my mind, to say when I see something that doesn't sit right with me. And I guess if I had to trace it back, my parents divorced when I was pretty young. And I was the oldest daughter, and I've always been extremely independent and have just had to kind of, in some ways grow up quite young. And so I don't know if that's really how I found my voice, but it's really just kind of who I am because I can't really, well, I shouldn't say I can't restrain myself, but it's hard to restrain myself. My natural tendency is absolutely to say something, and it definitely bites me in the butt sometimes because.
Tell me about that. When have you ever felt like you went too far, or have you ever regretted speaking out?
I have not regretted it, but I have definitely had cases, even at old jobs, where my boss might say something to me like, it would be better if you didn't say things like that, or you should really keep those things to yourself, or we don't get political here, or that kind of thing, which is one of the reasons why I ended up launching my own firm, because I don't want to be bound by somebody else's ideas of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So I've definitely had those kinds of comments of, it would be better if you were quieter. But at the end of the day, I don't regret anything that I've said. And I do try to be careful from the perspective of I'm not coming out and like swinging a hammer and trying to smash every single person that, says something that I don't agree with. So I try to be, I guess, just very thoughtful about it. But I don't regret anything that I've said.
Okay, how many times have you read something on LinkedIn or elsewhere and dying to get in there and not done it?
More than you think. One of my strategies, actually, Cathy, is if I really am having a hard time, like, oh, I've got to say something to this guy who's mansplaining, or I've got to comment on this. Sometimes I'll just text a friend, and I might even send them the LinkedIn post and say, like, oh my gosh, can you believe this? And we'll privately maybe have a little vent about it, but I don't feel I have to comment on every single post.
Yeah. I've read a few and I'm like, go, Danika, go, whenever I see it. So funny. So one thing that made the news actually was a couple years ago at Future Proof, when the band that played had some misogynist lyrics, pretty bad actually. And I read an article about it. It was a good review of it, and several people commented on it, but you were the only one that gave your name. That's a good example of, I think, who you are in this industry and why so many people admire you, because you're not afraid. And since you do own your own practice, what repercussions are going to happen from that, truly, you know?
It probably isn't going to have a dramatic impact, but I definitely have some people that don't like me because of things like that, and that I will probably never get invited to those conferences. I will probably never get invited to speak by those people, and I'm okay with that. But you're right, it's not going to impact like my ability to get clients or my client relationships or anything like that.
Yeah. So your feelings don't get hurt by that. You're okay with all of that. It's just part of who you are. And
Yeah, I am okay with it. I do think it's really important for other people to do what feels right to them. And so what I mean by that is not everyone's going to be as outspoken as me, and I don't think everyone should be. Not everyone's going to be comfortable with that. Maybe they do have more risk because they don't own their own firm, or they're in an environment where they're not able to speak up as much, and that's okay. I mean, everybody has to find the level that they're comfortable with. And I also think it's fair that most of us are probably pushing a little bit outside of what's comfortable, but I don't think everybody should be as outspoken as I am, for sure. That's just not realistic. And so everybody has to find the version that is appropriate for them and their circumstances and their comfort level.
okay, great segue into my next question. So you run a firm. You've been running your own firm since 2020. I want to talk to you a little bit about your recent merger, but before we get there, how in your firm do you support these beliefs of yours with your systems, your practices, your hiring methods? Because I think that's one way we can all make our industry a better place. And I'm just curious what you are doing specifically towards that end.
Mm-hmm. I think there's two components to that. One is how I work with my clients, and one is how I work with my team. So, from the perspective of hiring and having a diverse team, there's all sorts of things in place around encouraging people from a variety of backgrounds to say apply for the role, to feel they can bring their full selves to work, and creating a culture where that's really actually happening, and it's not just something that we put on our website of, hey, everybody is welcome here, but we're actually making that a reality in terms of the culture that's created at the firm. So that's really important on the team side. And that can mean all sorts of things, from allowing people to have a flexible schedule because they have to pick up their kids from school, or, there's any number of things. we haven't done it this year, but in the past we've had like a dedicated day of service, and everybody takes the day and you can volunteer with whatever organization is important to you. But that's just an expectation that everyone in the firm is giving back in their local community. So there are lots of things that we're doing on the firm side for kind of the internal culture. And then along the same lines, when I work with my clients, I want them to feel like they can bring their full selves to the engagement, which means no judgment, no shaming people for their spending or their debt or anything like that. And really creating systems where the women are the center of the engagement. So I know your practice focuses a little bit more on maybe single women, and most of my clients are in a partnership, but really centering the woman in that engagement, regardless of who is the person that earns the most and all of those things. So we really prioritize the woman. Sometimes there's two women, but we want the women to feel like they are not just you have a seat at the table, but you are actually the priority in all conversations, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. I live that every day. I do have some couples, heterosexual couples, not very many, and that's definitely part of my practice is making sure that both people are equally engaged. What about bringing in diverse clients? I know personally, even though I live in Oakland, California, I don't have a hugely diverse client base, probably more so than some, but there's always that issue that we're attracting people that are like us, right? It's just easier. It's hard to attract I have found, and I think a lot of advisors will agree, to attract a diverse clientele, even though many of us would want to. What are your thoughts on that? Is there a way to make change in that area?
Yeah, it's tricky. I do have a pretty diverse client base, and I'm not even entirely sure exactly what I've done to encourage that. I do have language on my website about working with people from the LGBTQ community. I have language on my website about working with people who are Black or brown. So, I mean, I'm very directly speaking to that population, but that also isn't really enough, in my opinion. So that's a start, because I think just, I mean, again, there's a whole range of things that you can do, but, say having pictures of people from different backgrounds on your website, that's a very simple thing that anyone can do, to have pictures of people of different ages, different sizes, different religions, like that. That's one way that you can signal to people that your practice serves people who look different from you. But there's lots of other things that you can do, whether it's, again, having very specific language. I really try to use gender neutral terminology in as much as I can. So I'm not assuming that I'm going to have a husband and a wife, because sometimes I'm going to have two husbands or two wives. So I try to use gender neutral language. So as much as possible, that sort of thing is woven into all of my content. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of it comes down to referrals. And, you start to work with people from some other background. Like I have ended up having a really significant number of people that just aren't from the United States. So that doesn't necessarily mean they're a different race. They could be white, but they're coming from another culture. And my husband is from another culture. So he's from United Kingdom. So we look very similar, but he does come not from this country. And what I like about that, and I often will say this to prospective clients, is that these people, for the most part, didn't grow up with our financial systems and don't know as much about the tax code and what a 401k is. And they don't have parents that they can ask, because their parents are in another country. So I think having, again, that sort of comfort level and just an understanding, oh, you didn't grow up in this country. I know what that means. That means that you did not grow up with all of these basic financial terms, even, that those of us that grew up here know. So those are the sorts of things that I think are really important to communicate as you're talking to prospective clients. It's things on your website, all that kind of messaging that you're putting out into the world.
Very good points. And I think a lot of the advisors listening will appreciate that and maybe think more about the kind of like how they face to the world. I think that's super important. So recently you wrote a really great LinkedIn post about all the things you've learned over the last 10 years in the industry. I loved it. And one of the things that stood out to me was the community that you personally have built in the industry. I know you have a lot of friends. You know a lot of people. You reach out. You've got your Friday office hours, and you're very generous with your time. And one of the things I want to hone in on is mastermind and study groups, because I think this podcast is about helping women build great businesses and want to be advisors and want to start their own businesses. And I think finding your tribe is one of the great ways to stay engaged and happy. So tell me how you've done that. How many masterminds are you in? How I bet you're in a few. Are they structured? Are they loose? Give us a little bit of Mastermind 101 if you don't mind.
Yeah, I have been in many masterminds over the last, say, 8 years or so. And honestly, I treat them as, as if there's a certain season for certain types of mastermind groups. And so I have kind of come and gone from some of those groups. Some of them have just sort of dissolved. Some of them have lived on after I've stopped being a member. But I've been in a variety of them that have come. Some of them are around, say, women business owners. Some of them are more topical, like I was in one for equity comp advisors for several years. And so I think there are lots of different intentions around them, and they have added a tremendous value to me as an advisor. And I've plugged into them in through various groups. So whether that's an XYPN group, or some have transpired because somebody made a post on a Facebook group that I am in. So the genesis of all of those mastermind groups has been a little bit different, but I'm comfortable with the fact that each mastermind group has its own purpose and serves me for a period of time. And then at some point, I might decide, this has been lovely. It's time for me to move on. And I do feel same with a business coach, that it's time, sometimes a couple years is great. And then it's time to actually work with somebody different. So I really actually do value the fact that I might be part of one and then move on to a new group.
Okay, great. This brings up a question then, because I too love masterminds. I've been in many. I have a hard time leaving. So even when I think that it's time, I have the feelings that I'm going to hurt somebody or, so I don't move on. How do you do that?
There is a risk that people's feelings will be hurt. And I really try to communicate when I have decided that a mastermind really isn't a good fit for me anymore, that it is not because I don't value the people in the group or the relationships. We recently, I was in a mastermind for close to 5 years, and we were really good friends. And at a certain point, our businesses just really were in different places. And I struggled with that one because we're very close as friends. And so both me and one other person in the group, had been talking on the side that this was, our businesses were just not in the same place anymore. So we kind of came to the group and said, like, hey, we love all of you, truly. But it doesn't make as much sense anymore. And we had a couple of meetings about it and decided I think we're continuing to meet twice a year or maybe even once a year. So it's very, very minimal. We still have a Slack group. So we just kind of decided, hey, it's time for this group to evolve and what makes sense for everybody here. And so we got everyone's feedback and we sort of made a decision, and everybody had different opinions, but we brought it to the group as like, how can we continue to have a group that's serving everybody? And if it's not, then it's time for things to change.
That is such a female way of doing things. And I'm saying that in the most positive way. That's excellent. Okay, so on to your firm. So Xena Financial Planning, and you started it in 2020. I know your history. I'm not going to go in your history because I want to talk about the future, but I want to tell the audience that you've talked about it on Michael Kitcey's podcast and also a couple other great podcasts that I listen to. If you want to know the prior to Xena. So you've been running it for 5 years, and then I saw in 2024 you merged with another firm, and that is a huge deal. And so I'd love to ask you some questions about why you made that decision, when you started realizing you might want to do that. Just you know what we want to know.
Yeah, I'll start with the short version and then you can tell me what you want to hear more about. But after launching my firm in the spring of 2020, I knew within 6 months that I did not want to stay a solo business owner. There are many things that I love about having my own firm, and there are quite a few things that I don't love. And so I found it very lonely. And pretty early on, then I started letting other people know, I'm not in any rush, but I'm interested in finding a partner at some point who has maybe some different skill sets from what I have that would be a complement to me and that we could actually build a business together. So I had put that out to the world, by the end of 2020, I was talking about that with people. And I had some pretty serious conversations with several people, multiple rounds of conversations about whether or not it was a fit. When I met my current business partner, he came up to me after I had presented at an XYPN Live and just introduced himself and said, "Hey, loved your talk. And, I'm also interested in partnering." And it was like, "Okay, cool. Nice to meet you." And we didn't talk again for a year or two. And we came across each other in some kind of small group conversation. I don't remember the exact event that it was, but we that came up, that concept of partnering. We both kind of said we were interested, and so one of us said, like, "Hey, let's have a conversation, one to one." And as soon as the two of us started talking, we were pretty sure that there was something a little bit different about our connection and our ability. We just communicated really, really well. We had very similar practices and very similar visions. And once we started really talking, he ended up coming to Seattle and we spent a full day together. And by the end of that day, we were like, "Oh yeah, this is pretty special." And so that was sort of how it came to be. And then we ended up going through the process really fast because we were pretty confident and we knew exactly what we wanted. We were very much on the same page. And so that all came to be a little bit more than a year ago.
That's amazing. So, I mean, it didn't happen overnight because you were looking for somebody for 4 years. So that makes, you were looking for the right fit. But it sounds like the chemistry was really good. I think that's so important, the personal chemistry. So you had the same similar size firm. Did you have similar client bases, similar niche, all those things?
Not entirely. I would say that most of our kind of tech stack was almost identical. Our firm revenues were almost, like, in terms of valuation, almost identical. There were many, many things about how we operated our firms that were similar, but our target audience actually was not that similar. So mine was women in tech and my business partners was more broad. It was just like mid-career professionals. Many of them worked in tech, but it wasn't as focused and it didn't have the focus on women. And so when we merged, my partner very early on said, "Your branding is way better than mine. We're keeping the Xena name." And we kind of broadened the niche a little bit to start, and we've actually narrowed it back down again. So at one point, it felt reasonable to say, "Okay, we're still going to focus on women, but maybe it's going to be more like women professionals." And we've gone back to the women in tech. For several reasons, but many of our current clients don't match that target, and we're okay with that.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. The niche you market to doesn't necessarily have to match your current client base, right? They're not the ones going on your website, reading the copy and all. I think we oftentimes forget that. And they're also not gonna fire you because you've got a different niche on your website and they don't fit into it. I mean, you may scare some people away, like, I'm sure a lot of men look at my website and go, "She doesn't work with men." Occasionally, one might slip through and they'll ask me, "Do you work with men?" And I'll say, "Well, it depends what kind of man you are." So, but I think that that's something that we have to remember is marketing is a little bit different than your actual business practice. I think it's great that he agreed to take your name. That solved him. I mean, that's sometimes a big problem.
It was very fortunate because I was pretty attached to my name, and so in having conversations with some other advisors over the years, that came up where I was like, I mean, I'm not 100% not gonna change my name, but I really like the Xena name, I really like the branding, and it would have been really hard for me to say goodbye to it, so I was pretty pleased that on that I think that very first day that we talked, he said, "Xena's clearly the better brand, so I'm totally fine," and he was not attached to his brand, so I was pretty grateful.
Well, now I understand why it went so smoothly because that's a big one. Because the name is great, the warrior princess. I mean, you stand for all those things, and I can't see you really going a different direction.
And I think that translates more broadly to our partnership in that I'm the more outward facing kind of voice of the firm, and he's more like, on the back. I mean, he very much works with clients, but he's more happy to do tech and process things. And he does not want to be out in the world speaking or, doing lots of exciting LinkedIn posts. That's just not who he is. And that's just a really good compliment because he's totally happy for me to take the lead on those things. And I'm perfectly happy that he's doing operations and compliance and all these other things that I don't love.
That's perfect. So, do you mind, and anything's too confidential, don't say so, but, did you each get valued by FP transitions, for example? And just how did you figure all that out?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. We did go through a valuation independently with FP Transition. So each of us had a valuation done. And I can tell you that they came in within 1% of each other. They couldn't have been closer. And we had already decided that if they were, within range, that we were just going to do 50-50. We really wanted to be equal partners. And so luckily the valuations came back such that they couldn't have been closer. And so it made that part really easy for us. But even from a, current revenue split and all these other things, we really wanted the practice to be something that we share. We don't want it to be, oh, well, your revenue is X, so you get paid this much. Like we get paid the same amount, regardless of what we're bringing in. And maybe that will change someday, but I can't really imagine that it will because we wanted to feel like a team. We didn't want to be operating silos. And so, it did, again, we got lucky that our valuations were so close, but it was extremely important to us that we felt like we had an equal say, we're getting compensated equally, and that there's not this differential of like, who's the bigger producer, who has a bigger book.
Yes, because, truly, like, you're more outward facing in the way you do your business, and so maybe you do bring in leads more than he does, but he's doing the grunt work. I mean, I'm sure you're doing some of the grunt work too, but you know what I mean? He's doing his part in the other really important parts of our business that's worth something. So I like that. That would be pretty conflict free if you could both agree that that's the way you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. We are very good communicators with one another, and so we check in on things a lot too. So I recently have been doing a little bit more on kind of the speaking and other sides, and we actually decided to split that off from the main business and have that be its own kind of outside business activity. And so I think as long as you're continuing to communicate and say and sort of check in, like, does this still feel fair? We don't want any resentment building, but we're kind of having that conversation pretty regularly and reevaluating if it needs to shift.
How do you structure that kind of meeting? Do you have a regular meeting cadence to talk about the business?
I mean, we have 3 mornings a week, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We just have a standing kind of check-in meeting. And then we're doing like a quarterly, I mean, we sort of loosely use the EOS system, but we're not as diligent about it. I mean, it's not very structured, but we're using that framework to do our strategic planning. So we have like a quarterly check-in on strategic goals and things like that. And so that would be the time when sort of the bigger stuff would come up. But we're pretty, I mean, we're communicating with each other constantly. So
Are you in the same office?
we're not. No, I'm in Seattle and my partner is in Portland, and we try to get together in person once a quarter. So we'll either fly to one of each other's cities, or sometimes we go to a conference and we'll tack on an extra day or two in that location and spend some time together. So we try to get together in person once a quarter.
Okay, so I'm envisioning you're really still kind of two separate businesses. He gets his own clients, you get your own clients. You share all technology, systems, staff.
hmm There's a little bit of overlap. We're trying to do more of it. It's just hard with all of our clients to really be engaged in, all of each other's clients. But there are times when he has a client who has an equity comp situation and he'll pull me in. And there are times when he'll come in to one of my meetings. And so we don't do as much of that as I would like, but I think we'll continue to expand that as much as we can.
Right. Well, you're still new, so you have no idea how it's going to evolve over time yet. What is your staffing like? How many people do you have supporting you?
Right now, we have a CSA, full-time CSA, and she is supporting both of our clients. And then we just hired a paraplanner who started last week. And she will also support both of us. So she's still very much training, but yeah, we're excited to have more capacity with the paraplanner on board because our CSA did not come from finance, so she doesn't have as much ability to kind of jump in on anything real technical, but she does a lot of Schwab paperwork. She's great. But we're excited to have the paraplanner join the team.
I bet. What is your work-life balance like?
Uh-oh. I'm gonna have to be honest about this one, huh? My boundaries are not fabulous. I will be totally honest about that. It's definitely an area of improvement. My husband, has had a really stressful work life for the entire time that we've been married, basically. He works in tech and he got laid off at the beginning of this year. Um, and may not go back to work. So he's a little bit older than me, and we're sort of navigating whether or not he's just going to be done. But what that means for me is, for the first 20 years of our marriage, I did all the cooking, all the grocery shopping, all the kids stuff, that was because I had a more flexible job, and I don't do any of that anymore. So he's 100% all the household, everything is on his plate. So what that does for me is it affords me a lot more capacity to devote to work. Just even my mental energy, because I'm not thinking about what am I going to cook for dinner, or I have to pick up the dry cleaning on the way home. So I'm really grateful that at the stage of life that I'm in, where I really want to be spending a lot of time growing the business, and I want to be doing a lot of things to really just expand my own learning, taking a new designation, all of these things. Like I have the space to do that because I have so much support at home right now.
That is so good. Well, why not? You're trading places. Because when you're running a business, let's face it, it's like having kids. It's like it's your kid. How old are your children now?
I have my oldest just started college, and then I have my younger daughter is a junior, so 15. 15 and 18.
Okay, so they're very independent, but you still have are they both living at home or one's off to college?
Just one is at home now. Yeah.
Okay, so so you're in a whole new phase of life.
Yeah, it's been a pretty big transition year in my house for sure.
What are the growth plans for your firm?
Yeah, great question. We've really shifted that actually in the last 6 months. And largely that's a function of our own personal goals changing as individuals. And again, with my husband, potentially being done with work, it's like, oh, well, maybe I'll retire a little sooner than I had planned because he's already off. And, do I want to work for another 15 years? I'm not so sure. So we are definitely actively exploring what that transition will look like for us and what the options are. Probably not internal succession, but we don't know exactly how it will play out.
The internal succession, why have you ruled that? I mean, I know you're not saying you've ruled it out, but what are your thoughts that it probably won't go that way?
I think, just our experience in having associate advisors and having those people maybe move on that we thought they might stay and end up becoming, partners or equity owners in the firm. We just realized that if we were putting all of our emphasis on, our internal team, that it was risky. If somebody leaves, then your succession plan falls apart. So it's, we haven't 100% ruled it out, but it seems like that's probably that's probably not the path we will take at this point. And we also realized that we could reach a lot of our goals without having associate advisors and kind of doing this internal succession plan. So I think at this point, we're planning to build capacity with our CSA and our paraplanner, but not adding an additional advisor and just growing out our existing kind of client base. So right now we have 120 clients. We think we'll probably go to maybe 150 between the two of us, but that's probably about our max for just the two of us.
One of the beauties of our business, the independent RIA space, is that you can build a firm in so many ways. I mean, we have so many options. You do not have to build a big firm. You can have what I used to hate this term, lifestyle practice. I used to think it was an insult. Like, no, I work just as hard as anybody else. I have a lifestyle practice. I built it exactly the way I want. My time is my own. Like you, I've tried so many things, bringing on people that might be successor. Then I realized they want to be me right now, and so many things. You go through a lot of things when you've been in the business for 20 years. So, and I think there's no wrong way. I mean, I really don't. You have to be true to yourself and what you want from your life. And the beauty is you could do it that way.
Yeah. And one thing we realized as we were working with associate advisors and kind of training those folks up to become lead advisors was that we were spending so much of our time training, and that wasn't something that we particularly enjoyed, either of us. We didn't love the training part. It wasn't something that we thought we were very good at. And it was like, oh, I very much want to give back to the industry, but maybe it isn't building out my own team. Maybe there are other ways. I'm sure there are other ways that I can give back to the industry and encourage the next generation without actually training. And I can only train, a couple people maybe in my firm anyway. So if I can have an impact in other ways, then that's my preference.
We are very aligned in this. I feel like I used to feel really guilty that I wasn't building a firm because I could attract a lot of women to my firm. I have attracted many over the years that have wanted to work for me. And I have felt awfully guilty about that I'm not building those opportunities. But then again, I am doing a lot of mentoring, and in my own way, I think I've made an impact on the industry and helping to make women see what a great career it is. And I think you've taken that even further. So tell me about the Friday, once a month Friday.
Yeah. Once a month, I do an Ask Me Anything call. It's for anyone who is already an advisor or is thinking about becoming an advisor. And I limit it to 5 people. Sometimes there's 1, sometimes there's 5. And what I love about those calls, which I think I've been doing them for 4.5 years, there's always such an interesting mix of people. And it's not just because they're coming to talk to me. I'm like, I want you all to learn from each other. And oftentimes there will be, I had 2 teachers one time that were both thinking about transitioning to become financial advisors. And it was like, you're both coming from the exact same. So they immediately hit it off and were messaging each other. And
Oh, so they're all on at the same time.
they're all on at the same time. Yeah. So to me, that's the really fun part because we get people at different phases. So some people are already in the industry and thinking about launching a firm. Some people have launched a firm but are having a hard time picking a niche. Some people are just career changers and they haven't even started the process yet. So there's the opportunity for people to learn from each other, which I think is amazing. So those calls have been really fun. I get a ton of value out of them and it's such an easy way to give back and it takes me an hour a month.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe I should start doing that. I like it a lot. Uh, I wanna talk to you about your speaking career. So, you mentioned earlier that you spun off that part of your business, and I've been following you enough to know that being a speaker was one of your big aspirations, and you really worked at it. So and you've been successful at it. You're doing keynotes now. Talk about that a little bit. Are you still getting the enjoyment out of that you thought you would?
Yes and no. It's something that I really do not feel comes naturally to me. Like I don't get up on stage and think, wow, this is I get so much energy from this. Like it's hard. It's not my natural state to talk in front of, I'm fine with small groups, but a big group, talking in front of 500 people, I find very intimidating. And one of the things that has really been so powerful about my career change and all of this whole path is the most growth that I have gotten as a professional is when I'm doing something that gets me out of my comfort zone. And getting on stage is very much outside of my comfort zone. And it's like it's not natural to me, but also I can do it. I definitely can. I just have to practice, right? It's like a muscle. And so every time I get up there, it's a little bit easier. I still have stage fright. I don't know that that's going to go away, but it's a little bit less every time. And I do think what has become more clear to me the more that I do it is exactly the type of audience that I want to speak to. That part of it has shifted a little bit. I have also done some retreats, like a smaller group, and have experimented with facilitating. Say, I've did one with Carl Richards recently. And that to me is actually a little bit more appealing because I like the smaller group. I like intimacy over, speaking to 500 people. It doesn't mean that I won't do both, but my preference is a smaller, intimate environment. And so I'm trying a lot of these things out to see what resonates, what I enjoy the most. But I do get a lot of value from trying something new that maybe isn't easy for me and just plugging away at it. That doesn't mean I'm going to pick something completely off the wall and decide, I'm going to become a basketball player because, that's, I'm really not good at basketball. But I do think there are areas of, tremendous growth if we're willing to put in some hard work and just, try some things out that maybe aren't super natural to us.
I think you're right, and it also enhances the rest of your life, right? You feel more confident in yourself as a human that, "Wow, I could do this. Well, I could do so many things." It definitely has to be a big boost in confidence just overall. So, I relate to your feelings about public speaking, even if I'm on a panel. I mean, if I'm at a conference and I'm on a panel at 4, it's all I could think about all day is my appearance on that damn panel, and I can hardly wait for it to be over. So, I totally relate, but for our listeners, I think it's worth it to do it anyway. It gets you out there, you meet people, uh, you can feel proud of yourself for some of these things.
Yeah, and you never know who you're going to touch or who you're going to reach. I also feel really strongly that there's too many men up there on those stages, and I want to see more of us. And those men probably have the same issues that all of us women are having about confidence, and maybe I don't feel super comfortable, but they're doing it more. And I just want to see. There's so many talented women in our industry, and whatever I can do, it's like okay, I'm not good at this either, but I'm going to practice until I get better. And maybe it won't be pretty, but I wanna see more women on those stages.
I almost always say yes when I'm asked to speak for that reason, because I want to see more women, on panels and keynotes and all that. So I'm hoping God, bringing a good point. I wonder maybe one of the reasons we don't see more women is that they say no. I mean, I know that's not the only reason, don't get me wrong, but maybe they're afraid, and I don't think you need to be afraid.
Well, be afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah. 'Cause our community is pretty darn supportive in the end. We have good people in this industry. And so, yeah, do it anyway, even if you are afraid. That's really good advice. You have to ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen?
Right. I mean, so yeah, I could forget what I was going to say. Or, I was at an event a couple years ago, a conference, and there was a woman on stage, and she was clearly very nervous. And she was kind of, getting a little flustered and kind of tripping over her words a little bit. And the audience was so supportive. It was really sweet. People were clapping and sort of calling out to her, like, you got this, like, take a second, and she recovered. And it's like, how much better is that than, walking off, you're running off the stage because you got embarrassed for a minute. It's like, okay, well, that part, she definitely was struggling, but the audience was amazing, and she ended up doing a great job.
Exactly. And people will remember that she did a great job, not the beginning part, right? And the other thing we have to remember is most people are thinking about themselves half the time anyway. So that's hard to think about when you're up there putting yourself out there, but it's really, really true. So I'm excited to ask you about something I just read about on LinkedIn about your new venture, Xena Rising. I went on LinkedIn just to see if I could find out any of the more tidbits about you this morning, and lo and behold, I find out you're launching this cool thing. So, do you mind chatting about that? And
I do not mind talking about it. In fact, it's hard for me to talk about anything else right now. I think that I have been considering something like this for a long time, and I've known that I really have a lot of passion about advancing women in our industry. And there's so many great things out there, but none of the existing communities or different events, like, they just never really spoke to me. And that's fine, right? I mean, everybody's, there's different variations of things out there that are going to speak to different people. But I finally decided, if it's not out there, the thing that I personally would want, then I'm going to create it. And so Xena Rising came to be within the last couple weeks. I finally decided, like, this is happening. It's time for me to do this and see what comes of it. So ultimately, I do expect it to be bigger than, just a retreat, but that's our first event is a retreat. It'll be a 3-day retreat just for women in our industry, and it'll be small. So it's capped at 14 people. We've got a venue that's the maximum capacity. So we're, buying out the whole space. And, and that's by design. Like, I think 14 people is a great size for an event like that. But I do want there to be future events. I really want there to be a community element. And so that will all come. But this first retreat will be the initial event, and I'm finalizing the logistics on that hopefully this week, and we'll have the exact dates and location announced fairly soon.
great. Well, that's super exciting.
Yeah, and what's really important to me about it, to be honest, is, again, there's all these different communities out there, but I wanted not just a place for women in our industry to kind of come together and have community and all of that, but I want this to be a place where we are coming together around a shared value of moving our industry forward. Like, that is the foundation of what this group is about. It's not just, hey, we're all struggling, we all are in this male-dominated field, and just appreciating that aspect of our work, which that will be part of it. But I really wanted it to be about, we as a group want to change the industry. We're not necessarily going to plot out like strategy, but that needs to be the foundation of this entire community, because to me, that's what's missing.
Okay, great. So we just have a little more time. I would love you to share what it means to you to change the industry.
To me, there's so many things that we probably won't be able to get very far in the next few minutes. But at a high level, I would say number one is, of course, recruiting women to get into our industry, but we have to keep them. So there's lots of women that come into this industry and do not stay because they do not have flexible work environments. They're the only woman in their office. There's so many things that lead to people leaving our industry. But I think we have to recruit, we have to retain women in our industry. And one of the biggest things that I see lacking right now is that more men are not participating in this. Like, there's lots of women talking about how we need to change. I don't hear from very many men saying, this is important to me at my firm. These are the things that we're doing. And I understand that the environment that we're in politically means a lot of people are just kind of keeping their mouths shut. But at the end of the day, we need the men in power to make this a priority in their own firms and their own organizations, for there to be really significant change. But again, sort of retention and retaining women is really significant. And we need women at the top. We do not need women in administrative roles. If you go to a website and see a firm and all the women are at the bottom of the page, like that's not what we need. We need women in leadership roles. So there's a lot, but to me, it's about having more representation of people from various backgrounds, at all levels of leadership, and significant support from the men in our industry to actually move that needle.
Well, there is going to be a big economic incentive to bring more women in, and that is this big wealth transfer that we've been hearing about for decades, but it really is going to happen, and it is happening. And I think, from my experience, not all women want to work with women advisors, but women's communication style definitely suits women clients and investors. So to me, I hate to say it, sometimes there has to be an economic incentive, as well as this is good for society in general and good for our industry in general. And I think that's going to be a key motivator to get more women in positions of client facing. My big thing is I think women should start their own firms more. It is easier than ever to start your own firm. It's not for the faint of heart. I mean, we know we've done it. It's hard, but it's one way to get more female presence in our industry in positions of power.
Absolutely. I think for everybody, they have to figure out, if that's the right decision for them or not, because some people won't be able to take that kind of risk. But I think that owning a firm is a really easy path to growing your own wealth, to being able to have a voice that's not constrained by compliance or, a boss that doesn't agree with you or whatever. So there's a lot of benefits to women owning their own firms.
And the other way, which is more common, women are employees, is to push for what they want, find their voices within their firms. If they didn't join the right firm that's not giving them opportunity, get out and find a firm that will. I mean, I know all of these things aren't easy, but I think that's going to force change. I talk to so many women that don't like the firm they're with. Maybe they're an advisor, but their management team won't let them work with the kind of clients they want to. They say, no, we don't do that. We don't want to focus on women clients. And so they're stuck in firms that they're not really enjoying the work. So, a little bit of open-mindedness there would go a long way too.
Yeah. There are a lot of places for improvement in our industry, but I think each of us can make a difference in our own way, in our own space, as much as we're capable. But yeah, there's a lot of really big things that need to shift, I think. But the more people that are willing to take risks and launch, something like what I'm doing or bolster an existing community, there's plenty of opportunities for us to kind of participate in.
I 100% agree. Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it. It sounds the 14 sounds like you probably have that filled up already, but I'm going to keep my eye out for future events.
I'd love that.
This has been so fun to talk to you, Danika. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. And I'm looking forward to seeing you more offline as well.
Let's do it. And thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a 5-star review. It helps more women advisors discover the strategies and stories we share each week.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. This podcast does not engage in rendering legal, financial, or other professional services.